Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about intermittent fasting. This video, or just, requests for my opinion on intermittent fasting has been very popular. So I'm finally sitting down. I've got all of my thoughts together so I can share my just broad overall opinion on intermittent fasting as a registered dietitian. If this video has brought you to my channel for the very first time, first, welcome. My name is Becca. I'm, as I said, a registered dietitian, and I'm obviously, of course, super passionate about nutrition and health, but I'm also equally as passionate about intuitive eating and approaching health and nutrition in a way that is sustainable, that in a way that doesn't interfere with a positive relationship with food. So you're going to see my opinion in this video, obviously, but you can probably guess that intermittent fasting is not something that I would necessarily recommend, and let's get into why. First, let's just go ahead and define intermittent fasting. So it is essentially an approach to eating that alternates between fasting and eating on a defined schedule. Now, the schedule or approach can be different depending on the intermittent faster. There are a few most popular options. So there's the 16-8 approach, and that is basically you fast for 16 hours and then you eat for 8 hours. You can eat within an 8-hour window within 24 hours, and that is the only time that you're allowed to eat. And this is a daily approach. So you would fast for 16 hours and then eat within an 8-hour window every single day. Next, there is the 5-2 approach, which is where 5 days a week you eat quote unquote normally, and then 2 days a week you restrict yourself to typically just one meal, and you're shooting for like around 500 calories. So it is a drastic reduction in calorie intake on those 2 days a week. Also, some people will adopt just kind of like an alternate day schedule where they eat normally one day and then fast the next, and then they can just continue in that pattern. And then of course, some people may come up with their own patterns and their own kind of schedules to adhere to with intermittent fasting. Okay, so what are the proposed benefits of intermittent fasting? First, a lot of people I know use it as a tool for weight loss, and weight loss can be achieved through intermittent fasting. Also, better blood sugar control is another proposed benefit, a decrease in inflammation, better cognitive function, and lastly, improved longevity. So these are all of the benefits, the main benefits that typically are proposed when looking at intermittent fasting. And there is a lot of research, actual research, peer-reviewed articles on intermittent fasting, and these are the kind of benefits that's found in the research. So not only is there actual research to back up potential benefits of intermittent fasting, there is this whole other huge argument, in favor of intermittent fasting, and that is that we have been eating this way, or our bodies have adapted to eating this way thousands of years ago. If you go back to hunter-gatherer times, we would go long periods of fasting until we had, like a meal, until we were able to hunt and gather food to consume. And the real argument here is that our modern life, we eat way too much. We eat all throughout the day. We don't have to hunt and gather for our food, so we're not forced to go long periods of time. But also, even, not necessarily even looking at hunter-gatherer times, just looking at like 50 to 100 years ago, our eating patterns, were different, the argument is, because we didn't have, for example, technology that prolonged our days. We didn't have electricity that kept us up at night. We just went to sleep. But nowadays, we are all watching Netflix and eating snacks in front of the TV at the end of the day. At least that's what the argument is. And of course, we are much more sedentary nowadays than we were 50 to 100 to thousands of years ago. We are much more sedentary. There's a lot less physical activity going on nowadays in our daily modern life, unless it is planned for. So between eating frequently throughout the day and therefore never needing to tap into our own fat stores for energy, and also just being sedentary in general, the argument is that this is a huge cause of, increased weight gain, risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all of that, which isn't necessarily false. And the proposition is that intermittent fasting is the solution to this. By creating these longer periods where we're not eating, that is going to directly, kind of negate this issue that we've created in our modern life. Now, whether it's coming from like the health and fitness industry or whether it's coming from like the medical field, intermittent fasting is typically recommended as a lifestyle change. It's viewed as a lifestyle change. It's not necessarily your traditional diet. And again, the argument here is that it is easier to stick to. Notice I didn't say sustainable. No one's calling this necessarily sustainable. It's just easier to stick to than a more traditional diet. Now, there are a few contraindications for intermittent fasting, at least from the medical field. So children and teens under the age of 18, it is never recommended that they try or dabble in intermittent fasting, which makes sense. They are growing, they need food. They should not be going through chronic periods of fasting sustained over a long period of time, because that could most certainly hinder their growth and development. Another contraindication is women who are pregnant and breastfeeding. Same thing goes here. Pregnant, breastfeeding, we need extra energy to literally build a human and then create or produce the milk used to sustain the life of that human. That is a tall order. We need to bring in a lot of extra calories, hundreds, 300 to 500 or so extra calories, depending on what stage of that you're in order to sustain that process in a way that is not taking away from the health of our own body and taking away from our own stores. So absolutely contraindicated for pregnant and breastfeeding women. Another one is anyone with diabetes or just blood sugar control issues in general. It is definitely not recommended that you induce any type of fasting, especially chronic fasting. And then lastly, those with a history of eating disorders. As you can imagine, this could bring a lot of those unhealthy eating behaviors or disordered eating behaviors back. So those are contraindications from the medical field. I would stand to argue that maybe more people shouldn't be trying intermittent fasting, but we will get more into that. Okay, now so you may be thinking, all right, Becca, this doesn't sound so bad. I mean, there's legitimate benefits that are, backed by research. It does sound easier to stick to than, cutting out food groups or just having to eat less in general and being hungry. I mean, there's no restrictions other than when you can eat. There's no restrictions on what. This sounds actually not so bad. That's what you may be thinking, and I completely see where you might be coming from. But as a dietitian, my goal and my aim is always to teach, subscribers or viewers or students in my program. I want to teach them an approach to food and nutrition that is actually sustainable, something that they can implement lifelong, and that also, allows them to maintain a positive relationship with food. And this is not that. Now I want to go through what I see all the issues are when it comes to intermittent fasting in my personal and professional opinion. So first and foremost, it's not sustainable. It really isn't. If you believe that you are going to start intermittent fasting today, and this is something that you are truly going to do for the next year, 5 years, 15 years, 40 years, 60 years, if that's truly what you believe, then hey, more power to you. But from what I've seen in research, when it comes to strict rigidity in any way around food, whether it's cutting stuff out, whether it's limiting quantities, whether it is, creating certain times you're allowed to eat and not allowed to eat, it's just not something that we as humans can continue with no negative side effects, especially when it comes to our mental health, for long periods of time. It's just not possible to do in a sustainable, healthy way. Another issue I see with intermittent fasting is it completely disregards how catabolism actually works in our body. It kind of ignores one huge piece of it. And that is that when we are, underfed, if we are fasting, we're not bringing calories and therefore energy in for our body to use for the functions it needs to carry out. It's going to turn to our stores. Now, yay, it's going to start burning up fat. And that's the whole point of intermittent fasting. It's stop eating all the time, create these periods of fasting so that you actually do tap into your fat stores, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Fat is an incredibly efficient form of energy. It's the most efficient form of energy we have in the body, and it can be turned into carbohydrates in order for us to fuel, our cells, our brain, everything that needs actual carbohydrates. We can do that with fat, so that's good. However, there's a huge caveat here, and that is when you are in this fat burning catabolism mode, you are most likely also burning up muscle as well, breaking down protein to then turn into glucose to use for energy. Our bodies aren't necessarily designed, or we can't like trick them into only burning fat. 9 times out of 10, you're just in full catabolism mode. The energy is not coming in, so our body turns inward and starts looking at our stores, fat, but also protein, which is your muscle. And if you're breaking down muscle, you are breaking down your lean mass. That's a huge driver of metabolism. So a lot of the times with chronic fasting, you can actually make your metabolism go down in the short term. But more importantly, what I'm trying to get at here is you can wreck and really reduce your metabolism in the long term. Because if you all of a sudden start chronic fasting for, let's say, a few months or a year of your life, and you end up eating up a lot of your own muscle stores, you are lowering your metabolism almost permanently until you build that muscle back up, which is not the easiest thing to do. So I just don't like that we're talking about like the benefits of burning fat and using up your fat stores, but we're ignoring the fact that you are likely tapping into your own muscle and protein stores as well. Another issue I see with intermittent fasting is it's almost always, especially when it comes to the research, which is like the most legitimate leg to stand on when it comes to the benefits and, you know, the argument for why intermittent fasting is a good, healthy option. It is almost always in a weight loss context. We're using intermittent fasting in order to bring about weight loss. And if you actually look at, you know, weight loss research as far as long-term success rates, and I'm not talking a year, that's what most studies that you'll find that look at weight loss, no matter what the method is to create the weight loss, they are usually looking at just a few months up to a year, and they consider a year long-term, but a year really is not long-term. I'm more interested in what happens after 3, 5, or even more years, and the studies that look at like the 3 to 5 year mark, it's kind of tough to create studies that go even further than that, at least not a lot of them. They almost always see just failure when it comes to weight loss, and by failure I mean the weight comes back on. And unfortunately, a lot of the times what we see in the research is that not only the weight comes back on, but you actually gain even more weight. Maybe it's because the metabolism suffered and, you know, it takes less food to put the weight back on than it did before. That may have something to do with it. There's certainly a lot of factors, but usually we see true long-term, 3, 5 or so more years, the weight comes back on and you actually end up gaining more. So intermittent fasting, if it's used as a weight loss tool, we know it's not sustainable for health reasons, but also any weight loss that you lose or any weight loss you create through intermittent fasting, it's probably just gonna come back on in a few years, unfortunately. Another thing I see really problematic is anyone trying intermittent fasting that has a history of disordered eating. Now it is like, you know, per the medical field, contraindicated for anyone who has a past eating disorder or history of an eating disorder. But I think it extends more than just, you know, like a diagnosed eating disorder. If you are someone who struggled with just some disordered eating behavior patterns or behaviors in general, maybe it never was a full-blown eating disorder, maybe it was never, you know, diagnosed as that, but you did struggle with disordered eating behaviors, a lot of stress around food, then, you know, I think a lot of people should be avoiding intermittent fasting for those reasons, not just those who have a diagnosed history of an eating disorder. And that brings me to my next point, that intermittent fasting, I think, really just breeds disordered eating behaviors. For example, when you are in your fasting window, you are not allowed to eat at all. No food, only, you know, like tea or coffee or water or whatever. You're not allowed to bring in any real calories. So imagine, you know, you're going about your daily life. If you're like me, you're a mom, you've got all these little kids that are demanding, or you're at work, you know, you are in school, whatever it is you're doing during your day that is demanding your time and your energy. Imagine doing all of those things on a chronic basis without actually bringing in any energy. What happens if you're really hungry and your body actually needs the energy, but you say, no, I'm not allowed to have it, and you're just ignoring your own own cues, that to me is defined as, disordered eating. It's going to create a lot of stress. It's going to create a whole lot of distraction in your life and preoccupation with food because you are, forcing yourself to fast. You're basically inducing self-starvation based on an external plan, ideal, theology, whatever. But it's not based on what your body actually needs in that moment. I also think that there is a huge possibility of binging when your eating window finally comes around. Let's look at that same example. You have not been able to eat all morning. You are, really trying to stick to this, and because you know that it's going to be healthy for you or help you lose the weight or whatever, but you're starving, and then boom, all of a sudden it's like 11 o'clock or whatever, and your window opens up and it's time to eat. You are kind of setting yourself up. Now, I'm not saying this happens to every person every single time, but you are certainly kind of flirting with the possibility here that you're going to just set yourself up for a binge. This is also just in general, it's just really going to skyrocket your food preoccupation, meaning thinking about food way more than it really deserves, thinking about food when you shouldn't be. And this is not just you having no willpower. I want to make sure that I make that clear. There are so many biological processes that get tipped off when we are in some kind of starvation mode, when we're not bringing in energy. And this could just be after a few hours of not eating, not long, chronic induced fasts. A perfect example of this is neuropeptide Y. This is something that your brain releases, and it literally causes you to crave carbohydrates because your body wants energy. It's kind of in this panic mode of oh, we haven't brought any glucose in. That's our favorite form and main form of energy that we like to use. So neuropeptide Y gets released, and it actually makes you more conscious of carbohydrates. It makes you crave carbohydrates. It makes you want to eat carbohydrates. And this is truly just a survival mechanism. So you're not just weak. You're not just why do I just want to eat carbs all the time? Oh my God, they're so unhealthy. No, it's not you, it's your biology. Another way this kind of sets you up for disordered eating is you quite literally have to, abide by these very strict time periods where you can and cannot eat. So if there's ever a time in one of those in those windows where you either want to eat when you're not supposed to, or maybe you're supposed to be eating, but you don't really want to eat, but you're well, I better get it in now because I'm not gonna be able to eat for a long time later. That is just further disconnecting you from your body's own cues. It's just getting you even farther from understanding your own intuitive knowledge when it comes to fueling and nourishing yourself. And it's just making you rely even more on external factors because you will become even more disconnected and even more confused. And you will truly have to rely on these rigid schedules or external plans or guides to eat. Another reason I feel like this really leads to disordered behaviors is when it comes to social gatherings. What happens if you get invited to brunch with a bunch of friends, but it's not during your eating window? Do you say no? Do you go and sit there and just sip on water? I mean, this really can create a lot of stress, and it can create a lot of disconnect. And this, again, is classic disordered eating behavior. It's not eating based on fueling yourself. It's not eating based on nourishment. It's not eating based on satisfaction and enjoyment. It's strictly eating based on a schedule. Another issue I see with this is just the amount of stress this can cause for a person. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that anyone who tries intermittent fasting is just going to be so beyond stressed out because of it, because I don't believe that to be true. But I do think that there's definitely people who will find this type of eating approach to eating very stressful. I think it will create major food preoccupation. I think it will just create a lot of stress around eating, around food, around how to, fuel yourself, and in social settings and everything. I think it's really going to be stressful for a lot of people. And my argument here is stress, whether it's physiological stress on the body or it's mental stress, that actually increases inflammation in the body. It increases oxidative stress in the body. Now, one of the huge proposed benefits of intermittent fasting is a reduction in inflammation. But I'm kind of here to play devil's advocate and say, well, if we're really stressed out about, you know, this eating situation, are we just negating that benefit completely? Are we maybe even having more inflammation due to increased stress levels than we would have had if we never tried intermittent fasting? Now, another huge issue I see, and this is a big one for all of my fellow ladies out there, and I know like 97% of the people who watch my channel are women, so I'm talking to you. Chronic periods of fasting can have major impacts on your menstrual cycle. Again, I'm not saying this is going to be true for every single woman, but I do believe that the chronic fasting, whether it's, you know, 2 days a week or every other day or every day, however you work it, it creates a lot of stress on the body. It also just cuts down your intake, right? You're eating possibly much less, depending on what your kind of starting point is. And this can quite literally turn off your like ovulation switch, let's say, in your brain. Your hypothalamus is responsible for sending the signals down to your reproductive system to ovulate. And if you are not bringing in enough energy, enough calories, and especially if you are going long periods of time frequently without eating, you know, that signals to your body that we are not able to carry a pregnancy. You know, we're not bringing in enough to sustain another life in addition to your body. So if you are in, you know, your whole menstrual cycle is literally like based around getting pregnant, okay? Like you have all these hormones that get your lining all ready to go, and then, you know, all of a sudden you ovulate and an egg is released, and if the egg gets fertilized, then you get pregnant, and if it doesn't get fertilized, then, you know, the egg just kind of, and all that lining sheds, and then you get a period. Like that is literally every month, that's what's happening. And if you are really disrupting your intake, whether it's through fasting or through a major reduction, or maybe both, that can signal to your body that you are not able to get pregnant. It's gonna shut down ovulation. It's really going to mess with that whole cascade of hormones that happens all month long. It's a really beautiful, like yet delicate cycle, and things can easily throw it off. And this is definitely one huge way that you could majorly throw a wrench in how this works for you every month. Okay, so those are all the issues that I see with intermittent fasting. Obviously, if you want to try intermittent fasting, I'm not gonna stop you. I'm just some lady on YouTube. You do you, and you give it a try. But I do think there are a lot of issues with it, and if you were to ask me, I would not recommend it. I think so many people approach intermittent fasting as a way to lose weight, which, as I discussed earlier in the video, is really just not sustainable. If you're bringing about weight loss through some kind of plan or diet, eating schedule, something that's not sustainable, that you're not going to continue to do forever, then the weight loss is not going, or the weight is not going to stay off forever, if that makes sense. And there are a lot of people that say they feel so much better by intermittent fasting. They have no, you know, they haven't felt this great in a long time, which, hey, I mean, that is a good thing. I'm not necessarily knocking that. But devil's advocate is, would you feel better? Would you feel just as good if you focused and really made, you know, healthy behaviors and nutrition a priority, nourishing your body a priority? Kind of depends, again, on where the starting point is for each person. Are they just not taking care of themselves? Are they not focused on nutrition? Do they not understand how to eat for energy and to fuel themselves? Are they not, you know, active? Are they, you know, not engaging in healthy behaviors? And then all of a sudden they're intermittent fasting, which is, you know, forcing them to actually pay attention more to what they're eating, forcing them to try and fuel themselves a little bit better, maybe. Basically, my argument here is, would you feel just as good if you just focused on healthy behaviors that are going to make you feel better, going to nourish you, but you could actually continue with, they're sustainable, would you feel just as good? And also, you know, a question I would ask you, if this is something that you're considering, is, since it's not sustainable, truly, are you gonna be still doing this in 40 years? You have to ask yourself that question. And if the answer is no, what happens when you stop? Where are you when you stop? Did you learn more about how to, nourish your body in a way that's sustainable? Did you improve your relationship with food? Did you understand more about how to, eat in a way that goes with your own biology? No. So my guess is no. So if that's the case, then you've basically just dabbled in a whole bunch of really unsustainable behaviors for a long time that didn't actually teach you anything that will improve your health long term. So where does that leave you? I feel like you would just be back to square one with no real improvements in your health. Maybe you did see some improvements while intermittent fasting, but again, if that's not something that we're continuing forever, then those benefits are probably going to just disappear, and all the progress you made, you will just, let's say, slide back, and you will just be right where you started before intermittent fasting, except maybe you are even worse off. Maybe you have disordered eating behaviors. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of stress around food that you now need to unlearn. Maybe you feel like a failure, but you're not a failure, okay? Again, it's not you, it's your biology. It's really hard to induce starvation and go against your body because it's going to release a whole bunch of feedback situation systems in your body that are gonna be like, whoa, 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 we need to eat. So it's quite literally going to be working against your fasting attempts. My professional opinion, I don't think that it's worth it. I don't think that it's worth the time. I don't think it's worth the energy expended because, again, it's not sustainable. It's not something that you're going to be able to continue long term. So I would argue that you would be so much better off, way, way, way better off, if you put all of that same time and energy into learning about nutrition and applying that, but doing it in a way that is actually sustainable, doing it in a way that doesn't interfere with a positive relationship with food, learning how to actually listen to your body and eat intuitively, eat in a way that your body is guiding, that your actual, your biology, no one else's opinions, no one else's plan that worked for them, nothing else. You're going off of your own cues, which is perfectly tailored to you, so that you can eat in a way that is going to promote longevity, eat in a way that is going to nourish you right now and long term, and eat in a way that allows you to have satisfaction, that allows you to enjoy food, that doesn't make it a stressful experience or a stressful part of your life, that doesn't detract from social settings and social situations. That is what I want for anyone watching this video, for my students in my program. That is my goal. That is what I want for anyone who is seeking to have a healthier lifestyle, to have a healthier body. I am all for the sustainable stuff, and this is it's just not that. So there you have it, guys. You asked for my opinion, now you have it. I hope that you can learn something from this video. If you are really intrigued by, this idea of intuitive eating, this idea of being able to, pursue nutrition in a way that's not confusing or not stressful, and really just eat for both pleasure but also health. I think that this can be a really hard thing. It can be difficult to marry the two together in a really effortless way, but that is exactly what I teach in my program. Mindful Eating Made Simple. It is half nutrition, half intuitive eating. I teach you how to actually eat based on health, nutrition, your biology. I teach you how your body works. We take a really holistic view. We talk about sleep, we talk about stress. I really want to help people be healthier people. And for me, in my opinion, the only way to do that from a food and nutrition standpoint is to have a really solid basis understanding of nutrition, how it actually impacts our body, how food works with our bodies, and how to actually decipher your own cues and eat based on what your body is telling you to eat and not rely on external factors that are not sustainable. So if you'd like to join my program, it is going to be opening back up very soon. I will leave a link down below where you can join the waitlist, so you will be notified as soon as it's available and get all of the details about what the program entails and how it looks. It's group coaching, so you will get to talk to me via Zoom call. You'll get to ask me your questions. Ask me questions about the content, ask me questions about your own situation. I will actually be able to help you on a much more personal level, kind of walk through this intuitive eating and nutrition journey. So I will leave that link down below for you guys if you want more information. But thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I hope that you gained something from it. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd absolutely love for you to subscribe and join my little community here on YouTube. But that is all I have, guys. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.